dark. We'll light some like extra lights around here and candles. But hi, happy Tuesday. Thanks for hanging through the first couple seconds here. I apologize that I'm a few minutes late. Technology, we will figure this out. I think this has been happening for a lot of people though, so any of you who are experiencing weird things going live, you'll have to let me know what you've done to fix it, and that would be super helpful. But let's chat today. I don't think we have our title. No, we do have our title on today. What we're gonna chat about today is the art and strategy of turning a cold pitch into a warm outreach that sparks connection and clients. So let me recenter my thoughts so we can really dive into our conversation. You will have to let me know if you're hopping on now or if you're hopping on later and watching on the replay, what your thoughts are about cold pitching. I know wherever you're in business, you must have an opinion about this. This is one of those topics that I find people feel like the pendulum swings. People swear by cold pitches and someone will tell you like that is the number one thing you have to do. There's people teaching, DM strategy, and like that is the best thing, like cold pitching through DMs, like the best way to make money. Then there are other people who hate DMs and talk about how much sliding into someone's DMs is like the worst thing ever. And other people will talk about how annoying it is on the receiving side. So I find wherever you're at in business, most people have a very strong opinion about cold pitching. So if you're watching now or on the replay, I would love to hear just what's your general thought about cold pitching. I think it's just helpful to see. It'd be really interesting to see how many different opinions there are. What I want to offer today for our conversation is, even if you're someone who's like, I hate cold pitching, I'm never going to cold pitch, I never want to use that strategy, hang anyway, because I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is applicable to business in general. I think it'll also be helpful for you if you're on the receiving end of getting cold pitches. So this isn't just going to be for those of you who want to use this as a strategy. I think this will be helpful overall as a conversation for and in business. And hey, whoever just hopped on, thanks for I know I was on and then fell off because of technology. So thanks if you're also coming back to join me. So again, let me know how you feel about cold pitching, what you think about cold pitching. What I thought would be interesting and what I wanted to share today is I wanted to give you a little bit just of insight around cold pitching as a strategy from the perspective of having used it myself in various aspects of life outside of business, using it in business, probably not in the way you think, and then also being on the receiving end myself. I probably get a cold pitch almost every day at this point. So I want to share a couple of perspectives around that. I want to be really mindful before we dive into our conversation today. This is not to say this is something you should do in your business or cold pitching is like the strategy to use. I absolutely do not think that is true. However, I do think it can be a useful strategy for some people, and I want to talk about that. And then I have 10, I know that sounds like a lot, but I wanted to break it down into micro sections. I have 10 thoughts just to play around with that we can talk about in terms of that art and that strategy of turning the cold pitch into a warm outreach. Because I do think what gives cold pitch and cold outreach such a bad rap, and why so many people don't like it on the receiving end and why so many people don't like doing it, is because of that cold element, and it does end up feeling very cold on either side. So I want to break down just some things I've really noticed myself from personal experience and just what I've seen work really well for clients and what I've seen on my end in terms of being on the receiving end, what's caused me to hire someone from a cold pitch, for example, and then what has me delete 99% of the cold pitches I get. So we can kind of talk about the difference there. So I'm going to break all of those down today. And as always, if you have questions, throw them at me, reflections, all the things, I love those. I'm just going to make sure, yes, okay, I have kind of a funky technology view, so I just want to make sure we are still live and rolling. So what I thought I would share first, just to kind of dispel this myth, because I think there's such a bunch of noise about how cold pitching doesn't work. And this is what's really interesting. This is not a strategy I currently use in my business. So this is going to sound today, because we're talking about this, I think this is the thing. I really want to preface with, I do not think this is the thing. I do think it is a strategy. And if you've been hanging out with me for any amount of time, I'm such a big believer that really every strategy works if you work it, and if it's the strategy that's in alignment for you. And honestly, even shitty strategies work if you work them and you have the mindset behind them and you have a good product or service on the other side. And this is just one of those strategies. And again, what we're going to talk through today, I think, is so applicable to all of business and to all of marketing, to all of sales. But something that I think is helpful for everyone to hear who has that thing where it's like, well, this would never work for me, is to also remember with something like cold pitching, this isn't always something you use just to try to book a client. The places in my business that I have at the start of business really used cold pitching was more for things like PR, was more for creating connections, was more for, I had, not the podcast I have now, not One Question, but when I first started my business, I had a podcast called Business Inside Out, my first year of business, and I was brand new to business. And so I reached out to people. I had to cold reach and essentially cold reach out to people I wanted to have on and essentially sell them to be on my podcast. I reached out, for different things I wanted to be a part of so that I could essentially have PR and do some organic marketing. And those all require a cold pitch. So again, even if you're not using this for selling, there's probably going to be a time in your business where you will want to use some of what we're talking about today. Before I started my business, this is what I thought would be helpful for everyone to hear, I very successfully used cold pitching in acting. It's how I got my agents. I used it when I moved to New York City. Many of you know when I moved from LA, where I used to act for a decade, to New York City, where I started over, and I first started in the advertising industry representing directors, kind of like a talent agent for directors in advertising. And I knew no one in New York City, pretty much. I had no contacts. And so the way I got into my foot in the door in that industry was all through cold outreach for the most part. I probably reached out to a few people I knew, and everything else was through cold outreach. And that's how I got a job. And that's how I got into that industry. And same thing with when I moved to New York, I was still acting. That's how I got an agent when I moved out here. I would kind of even joke that I met my fiance through cold pitching because we met on Tinder, which if you think about it, that's sort of a cold pitching app. And I share that again just to show and illustrate how effective cold pitching can be when done the right way, which we're going to talk about, and when done really from what I like to think about is not thinking of it as a cold pitch, but really thinking about it as how can we create a warm outreach to start a new relationship, which is really that's really what all of business should be, and that's what all of marketing should be. I think, again, why this falls flat so often and why there's such a bad wraparound and why so many people don't like to be on the receiving end of it is because a lot of times it does feel very, very cold. But I literally have throughout my life successfully used this as a strategy, but I think the reason it's worked so well is it has really always been how could I use this as a warm outreach and as a way to start a new relationship instead of how can I try to just spray and pray and reach out to as many people as possible that I don't know and try to force myself and insert myself into, whatever thing I want. And I think that's a bit of a mindset shift there. Let me know if you have questions. Again, I'm just checking the tech because it's a little funny on my side. It's very different than what I am used to seeing usually when we're live. What I think is really interesting and what I like to remember is and the reason I want to share this here and share this again, because I just don't think this is something we talk about a lot. And again, I'm not saying everyone go cold, don't everyone now go cold pitch me, or go cold pitch everyone that this is the thing to do. But when I think back over the last, 20 years of my life, I have so many opportunities that I would not have had I not used what we traditionally think of as cold pitching, again, which I want to reframe as a warm outreach. So many opportunities. I don't know that I would have had the acting jobs I did because, again, that's how I got my agent. It's how I got into voiceover work. I wouldn't have gotten a job in advertising. I wouldn't have worked in advertising. I'm sort of joking that Tinder was a cold outreach, but I wouldn't have met my fiance. There's also so many opportunities in general, just in terms of being on podcasts and things like that I just wouldn't have had. And so I, again, want to illustrate that just as before you decide, I hate this because I've received a bunch of shitty, cold DMs or cold emails that are done very poorly, before you just write that off as this doesn't work for me. I just want to give some evidence that this can be a tool or a strategy or a beautiful way to open up the door and open yourself up to beautiful new opportunities that just wouldn't exist otherwise. And something I like to remember with everything in life, with everything in business, everything at one point starts out as a cold pitch or a cold outreach, right? When everyone who is new to your world at some point is they're going to be a cold audience that we hopefully warm up and build a relationship with. And so in general, that's kind of always the case. And it's really, how do we think about changing that cold approach into something that is more of a warm approach and warming that relationship up that can make all the difference. Hopefully that makes sense. You all are quiet, so if you have questions, let me know. So what let's just see, did I have notes here that I wanted? I'm like thrown off by the tech today. I want to make sure that this was the other thing I wanted to share, that I share everything I wanted to here. The other thing I wanted to preface is, now in my business now, I don't generally use cold pitching very often, but I said this earlier, I receive at least one a day, if not more than that, cold pitches a day. And here's like why I want to break down the 10 things to think about. I don't want to say 10 steps, but 10 things to think about with them. I would say the majority of them I delete. The majority of cold pitches I get, I delete. A lot of them I don't even read. A lot of them I don't respond to. A lot of them they just get deleted automatically. And I say that just so there is a reason many people roll their eyes at cold pitching and don't want to do it, because generally it is done in a way that it feels kind of yucky on the receiving end. A lot of times I read stuff and it is kind of frustrating on my end. I always like to take the mindset of, this is someone hustling and doing the best they know how, and I always want to give people respect for that and never be frustrated at that, but I still delete them. And I have hired people who have cold pitched me before, like hired people who have, worked with me for a long time, and I have said yes to being, a guest on people's, just last week, someone essentially cold pitched me last week, the week before, for their podcast. I'm really, really excited to connect with and really excited to be on their podcast. And so I think it's just helpful to see, even though I delete the majority of them, when it's done well, it actually feels really great on the receiving end. And it can literally have hired people and said yes to people as well. And that's just to help you see that these are not created equal, but the big difference there, the differentiator, is what we're going to talk about and go through these 10 ideas, is the difference between really that cold pitch and that warm outreach. And it does feel so different on the receiving end. And if you've ever received kind of a cold pitch that's felt really good on your end, I would love to hear about that. It would be very, very interesting thing for everyone to hear. Okay, so let's talk about how to warm this up. How to warm up, and I should say for everyone, just so we have we're on the same page here, if we're talking about something like a cold pitch, what exactly do we mean? I'm just assuming everyone knows what I mean, but I should just preface what I mean. In general, when we're talking about selling and sales and marketing, and we're talking about audience, when we talk about a cold audience, we're talking about people who don't know you, they're brand new to you. As opposed to a warm audience, they're people you have more of a relationship, they're warmed up to you, they're warmed up to your work. A hot audience would be people who are ready to buy, and they're really they know, like, and trust you on a deeper level. So a cold pitch is going to be a pitch to a cold audience, people who you haven't built a relationship with yet. Oftentimes it's that first point of contact. They don't really know you that well yet, as opposed to, if I let you know I have spots open for one-on-one coaching at the end of this live stream, we've spent a bunch of time together, it's not a cold pitch anymore. We've started to build a relationship. If you've been watching my lives for a long time, you know me a lot better. It's just we have much of a, more of a warmer connection. So it's not necessarily just warm, fuzzy feelings. It's more that degree of the relationship you have with the person in front of you. So when we're talking about a cold pitch, we're talking about really pitching or reaching out to, starting a new relationship, and usually making some sort of ask with someone who you've never had much contact with. When I moved to New York City and I got a job in advertising and I didn't know anyone, I was reaching out to people in the industry who did not know me, who had no business talking to me, sending emails, and essentially, I'll walk through what I was doing, but essentially seeing if I could take them out for coffee, or if they would hop on the phone with me for 15 minutes, or if I could make a connection with them and essentially turn that into a warmer connection to get my foot in the door, so that I could find out what opportunities there were, for example. But they were very cold outreaches. No one I was emailing had any idea who the heck I was. So I was kind of crossing my fingers and hoping that they would open my email and respond and be willing to talk to me. And I was just shocked at how many people were, and just how, like, really what a lovely experience that was. That does make me, I have one extra, we might have, if we have time, I'll have an 11th thought here. Okay, so let's talk about how to warm these up so that they don't feel quite so darn cold, and so that they really help you make those connections, book those clients, get those opportunities. First one here for you is to do your homework, and don't confuse cold for blind or ignorant. I think this is probably the biggest pet peeve anyone who receives cold pitches has. I don't think it's so much that they're receiving a cold pitch as much as it is how often, because there isn't that connection, how often people don't do their homework. And it's just so clearly not even a match for the person they're sending to, and it's so clearly just a cut and paste, like spray and pray approach, and it can sometimes be incredibly ignorant, unintentionally. I know people are doing the best they know how, and again, like, God bless everyone who's like just doing the best they know how, but sometimes it can almost be disrespectful. I know people who have received, cold pitches for things that are just almost out of alignment with their message or their work, or that don't even make sense. I receive, we'll talk about that more. Well, we can talk about it now. I receive pitches for One Question, Unapologetic Questions for Unapologetic Results, my podcast that I love. If you haven't listened to it, you should. And I receive pitches all the time for guests. It was really interesting. I can always tell when someone hasn't done their homework, because I have a very specific podcast where we focus on one question. And so often I will get pitches where people are just pitching me all of this stuff that has nothing to do with what my podcast is about and why they make a great guest, and all the topics, they have where they clearly haven't even listened to the podcast. Do your homework. If you're going to reach out, if you're going to come uninvited into someone's inbox or into someone's DMs, do your homework first and make sure that you're speaking appropriately to the person that you're reaching out to, that you're aware of, who they are, the work they do, that you've done a little homework there, that you're also not disrespecting them. I get quite a few pitches, and again, all the respect in the world, but pitches where, quite frankly, it's like clearly someone hasn't done their homework. There are things I don't need. There are things that don't make sense for my business. There are things that don't make sense at all for the level of my business, which I'm pretty open about. So again, just do your homework and don't confuse cold for blind or ignorant. I think that will get you far if you're cold pitching, but also with marketing in general. If you're having sales conversations in general, if you're following up with someone, this is always going to serve you. Okay, next one here. I'm looking here because I actually made notes so that I want to make sure I stay on track and I remember all the things I want to share with y'all, because this can be a very valuable tool. Okay, so second one here, we're losing light. No, that's not. I should probably, that makes it even darker. We're just gonna be okay. We're gonna probably be in the dark in about half an hour, but we're just gonna roll with it. Pitch people would actually benefit from what you're offering or from what you're asking. And so it's sort of like if you're gonna pitch someone an offer, you're gonna pitch someone to be on your podcast or to do a live stream with you or to hop on a free call with you or something like that. This kind of goes to what we were just talking about in terms of doing your homework, but reach out. This sounds so obvious, and yet I am amazed at how often I get pitches, for example, all the time to add links to my website, to backlink for someone's SEO. And again, bless your heart for like hustling and doing the work, but you would probably catch a lot more yeses and save a lot of time, because a lot of people follow up, if you reached out with something that actually made sense for my website or for my work. I'm just always really amazed at how often people want to pitch something that literally doesn't make sense for who they're pitching to. I think at one point has anyone else gotten this? I got pitched something. It was like some toothpaste thing to be like a toothpaste ambassador. I don't even know. It was very fascinating. I get some very fascinating things pitched to me sometimes. And again, I have said yes to pitches, so I am receptive. I I know when I worked in advertising, a director's rep, we always read all the pitches we got, because sometimes we would meet great talent. Sometimes like a great opportunity would come through. So it's not like, it was like, oh my gosh, why are people emailing these pitches in, or why are people reaching out? But so often there's a disconnect where the person reaching out, goes back to that homework piece, is reaching out for something that just isn't benefiting the person they're sending it to, and it's just not a match. Okay, let's see, so the next thought here is, or the next tip here is, can you warm up the relationship before you cold pitch? So this is something I coach my clients around a lot, especially when my clients are pitching themselves to be on podcasts, or wanting to build connections. I have some clients who are in the done for you space. So this is, sometimes they'll do more of, they'll use cold pitching a little bit more. And when we talk about a lot is, how can you warm up people and kind of start that relationship before you make a cold pitch? So it really is that warm outreach and not a cold pitch. So that might look like, for example, if this is someone you follow on Instagram, engaging with their content a little bit first for, a week or two, putting in a little time to connect and like make your name and like leave some comments and maybe share a piece of their content on your stories, but start to take that from cold to, at least there's been a point of contact before reaching out to someone, and taking that time and effort to do that first. Someone did this recently to me, and it was really effective. They left some comments on my content and comments about my podcast before asking if I wanted to be a guest on their podcast. And it was so effective because they made the effort. It probably didn't even take that long, but they took the effort to do their homework, like we were just talking about, to build a warm connection, so that then when they made their ask, it was still essentially a cold pitch, but it felt so warm, and I was open and receptive to it because they had taken a little time to build some of that relationship first. Let me know if that's making sense. I think some other ideas that I'm like on the podcast kick because I receive so much from my podcast, so it's very present for me. And I have quite a few clients who are pitching themselves for podcasts. We talk about this a lot, where it's like, if you're pitching yourself for a podcast and you want to pitch yourself cold, leave a review on the podcast first. Maybe listen to the podcast before pitching yourself, and leave a screen grab it and leave a review on your Instagram stories or in your Facebook group and tag the person. These are all things you can do that are going to, again, connect you to that person before you go and pitch yourself, that's going to make that more of a warm outreach, where it's not so cold, because you've done a little bit of that homework, yes, to research them, but also a little bit of that work to build some of that relationship, or at least start the relationship before you reach out to them. Okay. Let's see here. So the next piece here, which I feel like this is also a little bit of a lot of this has to do with doing your homework. So I feel like these could all be like, do your homework A, do your homework B, do your homework C, like all little subsets here. But what I find really, 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 really powerful, if you are reaching out, so yes, doing your homework, but doing your homework in terms of not just like seeing how someone could benefit it or seeing if they're a match, but doing a little legwork to find out about the person you are going to have that warm outreach, to make a cold pitch to research them a little bit, and I'm using the podcast example. We're just going to roll with that today. Let's say you want to be on their podcast, listen to their podcast and have something to say about the podcast you've listened to. If you want to pitch to be a guest blog, on someone's blog, read a blog or two of theirs. If you want to interview someone for your podcast, read a piece of their content. I had a past client of mine, so this wouldn't even be a cold pitch, but this is just an example of this because she did it so well and I was so impressed. A past client of mine recently reached out to have me on her podcast, and when she reached out, she's a past client of mine who I adore. I was going to be a hell yes anyway because it's a client of mine. I love working, all the yeses there, of course, like I would do anything for my clients anyway, past or current. But she took the time to listen to my podcast. She left a review. She shared it on her stories, everything we're talking about here. And then she reached out with her essentially cold pitch, because we hadn't talked about this. She hadn't asked me before. And she was really specific in this to compliment my podcast, to compliment the episode, to use that as a tie-in as to why she was reaching out to me, and to essentially make it really easy for me to say yes, where it's like I had talked about these two things on an episode. Would I be willing to be a guest on her podcast as, to talk about this topic? And so what she did there, she did her homework. And in the sense that she did some research, she found out that was a fit, but then she used that and made it really clear and obvious when she reached out to me. When I've had people reach out to me for other things before where I've said yes, we'll use this in reverse. When I was reaching out, I'm using the advertising example because I think sometimes it's helpful for us to see it outside of business. When I was reaching out in the advertising world to get my foot in the door and to meet people, every single person that I emailed, I spent a good amount of time researching them, learning about their work, sometimes probably more time than I needed to because I'm a little type A that way. And every email I sent was specific to them, and I would highlight some of the things about their work and why that was interesting to me and why I was reaching out to them specifically before asking if they had, if I could take them out for coffee or if they had a few minutes, or before I, explained what my ask was. So I think that can just be such a powerful way to take a cold pitch and take it from a cold pitch to that warm outreach. Doing that homework and really connecting the dots, those specific sell when we're talking about sales in general. So this is applicable, again, not just to those cold pitches, but especially if you're going to pitch yourself to be on a podcast, pitch yourself to do a live stream with someone else, pitch yourself to be, a member of someone's, private community or something like that. Always, it's going to make such a big difference between that and just hitting the delete button. Okay, the next one here, I've already now lost track because I kind of jumped around here on what number we're at, but remember where you're at in relationship with the person you're reaching out to, and make your ask match up as to the relationship you're in and what that next step would be for the relationship you're in. Meaning, let me see if I can say this a better way, or let me explain this a little bit better. This is very applicable to sales in general. What I find sabotages people in sales in general, and this is just another way of selling, is they forget where they're at in relationship with the person they're talking to. And we always use the put a ring on it example. They essentially propose on the first date or on the first meeting, and they forget where they're at in relationship. Oh, this is the first time I've met someone, and what the appropriate next step in the relationship would be when you've just met someone. Most of the time, if it's your first time meeting someone, you've just swiped right on Tinder, it doesn't really make sense for the next step in the relationship to be, will you marry me? Right? Maybe that happens, but I'm just gonna go on a limb. I'm not married yet, so I can't tell you for sure, but I did say yes to getting married, and that's not how it went down here. That's how I know it went down for most people I know. Most of the time, there's a few steps that deepen the relationship, and each step of the relationship is what's appropriate before you get to the next step. Right? Are we on the same page here? Is this making sense? And I'm just, okay, we don't have comments there. Is that all making sense for you? So same thing, if we're thinking about something like a cold outreach and we want to make it a warmer outreach, remember where you're at in relationship with this person. Most likely this means you've never connected with them before. They don't know who you are. Maybe you did a little bit of what we were talking about in terms of warming up that relationship by making some of those connection points before you reached out, but you're still lukewarm at best at this point, right? Even if you've been doing that. It's not like you have been engaging back and forth and they've been consuming your content and they know who the heck you are, which means whatever your ask is going to be, think of your ask like your CTA, your call to action on a post, you really want to make sure it's appropriate for whatever that stage of the relationship you're in. So if you're cold pitching someone who has no idea who you are, has never talked to you before, you don't want to make an ask that would make sense for someone who is in a deeper relationship with you, who has been consuming your content for 6 months and is thinking about hiring you, right? Like, that doesn't really make sense. You want to make it very appropriate as what would be the next step to deepen this relationship. What would be appropriate if you just met and you just started dating someone, or you haven't even dated them yet, you just met them at a coffee shop, now that the world is kind of open again in some places, right? You're not going to ask them to marry you. You're going to maybe say, do you want to sit down and have a cup of coffee together? Do you want to go out for dinner? Do you want to go grab a drink? Do you want to go for a walk? So same, if you're reaching out to someone, think about that. I say that because on the receiving end, God bless people for trying and hustling. I so appreciate the hustle. But if you're coming uninvited into my inbox and it's a cold pitch, I have no idea who you are, and your cold pitch is for like a 10K offer, that's just, you're proposing to me. Like, it doesn't actually make sense. And I'm just going to delete it. And I think that's going to be the case for most people. It doesn't mean you're not great at what you do. It doesn't mean it's not a great offer. It just means that's not where we're at in the relationship. If my fiance had proposed to me on our first date, I feel like I knew on my first date I wanted to marry him, but I probably would have been like, oh, well, this is, no, I just can't say yes to that. You know, and like, that wouldn't have been because I wasn't having a great time, or I didn't want to marry him, or I didn't think, it just wouldn't have been where we were at in our relationship. So I think this is always helpful in sales, in your marketing, always a helpful thing to just keep asking yourself and to be mindful of, and to think like what makes sense as that next step. But particularly with something where you're having a cold or a lukewarm or a warmer outreach, to think about and to be mindful of. Okay. The next thing here that I will offer, and let me know if this is helpful or if you have questions. Y'all are very, very quiet today. What I like to think about with something like a cold reach out or a cold pitch, and really shifting it into that warm outreach and using it effectively and strategically, so it does actually help you to make those connections and to book more clients. What I like to think about is, how can you use this to start a relationship instead of to close a sale? So I talk about this with clients, because I do have a few clients who use this as a part of their sales strategy, and I have a few clients who use this really effectively, but they're using it, the reason it's working for them and the reason it's helping them make money and the reason it's helping them in their sales process is they're using it to start a relationship, not to close a sale. They're not cold pitching people. It's kind of like what we were just talking about, like, know where you're at in a relationship with someone. They're not using it to cold pitch people directly into an offer, because that's just one of those things where it's like you're shooting into a barrel. You're just gonna have to do that a lot. And it's just gonna be very time consuming, and it's probably not the most effective use of anyone's time. And if you're paying someone, it's probably not the most effective use of their time to just go put out a ton of offers. But starting a relationship with a cold pitch, completely different thing. And so I think reframing it that way and really seeing it as this can be a tool you can use to leverage to start a relationship, to open the door, is going to shift the way you think about this. And that's where it can be a really powerful tool that you can use that can open up more opportunities, as opposed to thinking this is the whole thing and everything needs to happen. I need to start and close in this cold pitch. That is when I think cold pitching gets a really, really bad rap. Hopefully that one makes sense. I'm gonna go on to the next one because I feel like that's pretty obvious, but if you have questions, let me know. Okay, this one ties in a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, but I think it deserves its own few minutes on it. And that is to personalize, and to remember specific sell. So specific sell, we were talking about that. Personalization always sells. And so I was using that example of that past client who reached out to me. And avoid copying and pasting. So I think with something like a cold pitching strategy, it is so easy to get into just copying and pasting. I can always tell when something's copied and pasted. Like, I'm pretty smart. I'm sure you are too. And nothing makes me want to delete something faster, and nothing makes me feel like someone is disrespecting my time more than spamming my inbox with copy and pasted text. I'm just not interested in that. That doesn't, like, I don't actually feel like it's speaking to me. I don't feel like it's for me. I feel like it's just for anyone who might, I feel like someone's just like taking up wads of paper and crumpling them and throwing them out and seeing if someone will grab the paper and open it up and see what's on there. And for me, I'm like, I don't pick up crumpled pieces of paper. So that's kind of how I feel about that. Whereas I think the difference is where you can take a template. I'm a big fan of templates. We use templates all the time in my business. I share templates with my clients. We use templates for almost everything. You can take a template and personalize it if you're going to use this as a strategy for people. Let's say you're pitching yourself to be a podcast guest or a guest on podcasts. You could create a template that you follow that saves you time and then personalize it with more than the name. I'm not just talking about like swipe out, change out the name, but personalize it for each person with some of the things we've been talking about. That's very different than copying and pasting. That's going to feel very different. That's going to feel like you wrote someone a letter for them specifically instead of crumpled up a piece of, paper that you're throwing out and hoping someone will catch. So I feel like that ties into a little bit of what we were talking about earlier, but I feel like it's helpful to really spell out there, because copying and you can also just formatting wise usually tell when something is copied and pasted, and it just feels on the receiving end. I'm sure if you've ever received it just feels like it's not for you, and it feels like the person on the other side doesn't care, and it just feels like, well, why should I even bother to read this? So I think just a really helpful thing there to go back to remembering, like doing your research, personalizing things, but that doesn't mean you have to reinvent the wheel every time. Make it easy on yourself if you're going to use a strategy like this, whether it's for pitching yourself for PR or pitching yourself for work. Again, I've hired people before who've pitched me, but what I would offer is use what you have there as a template instead of just copying and pasting and saying the same thing to everyone. That's also how you avoid mistakes. We did a lot of cold outreach when I was working in advertising, but that was the difference. We made sure to personalize it for each person, and we had a template, but it was a template, not just copy and paste. And when we did just copy and paste, or when I just copied and pasted, I will tell you from experience that was not received as well. It did not get the same response, and people could tell. And that's also when you make mistakes and you accidentally put the wrong name in. So don't do that. I've received that. I've received the email with the wrong, the copy and paste with the wrong name that was clearly for whoever was sent before. Okay, next thing. Ask yourself what's in it for them. Why should the person you are sending this to, what's in it for them? Why should they care? So I think what happens often with cold outreach, and the reason it's cold, and the way to switch it into a warm outreach, and the way to really serve yourself here and the person on the other side, is to remember it's not about you. It's about the person on the other side. And you want to reach out and think, how can I add or benefit to the person I'm reaching out to? How is what I'm reaching out with of a benefit to them, and how can I make this about them? The majority of what lands in my inbox is me-centric, meaning not me, but it's about the person who's writing it. It is all about that person and what's in it for them if I reply. And again, no shame, like I appreciate the hustle. I bow down to people for taking the effort. But why, if I have very limited time and capacity, for anything that's not my clients or my team, if I don't understand what's in it for me, why should I open your email and take time to reply to it or say yes to your offer? And I think this is something to ask yourself. If you're going to come, like I always think, like with something like this, you're going uninvited into someone's inbox, uninvited into someone's DMs. It's like showing up at someone's house that doesn't know you uninvited, and then making it all about yourself. You have to think, like, what's in it for the person in front of you? And if you can come from that place, of course it's for you as well, or you wouldn't be reaching out. But if you can come from that place and really think about what's in it for them, or how can I help them see, like, actually care about them. I actually understand I'm coming uninvited. I actually understand that this is a human being on the other side here. How can I make this about them? How can I make this easy for them to reply? How can I help them see this as a benefit to them, or this serves them? The more likely you are to get a response. The more likely you are to hear the yeses or to, take that relationship to the next level, to turn that cold pitch into that warm outreach that creates that connection or that client for you, or, whatever that next step is for you. I think this is actually what's coming up for me as I'm sharing this that I feel is helpful to share. When I started my business, my first paying client ever actually came from kind of what we're talking about through DMs. It was essentially a cold pitch connection, someone I connected with very briefly in a Facebook group that I sent a DM to, and essentially cold pitched. It was like an amazing client who I'm still friends with to this day. That was 5 years ago. But everything we're talking about, I bet if you asked her if I cold pitched her, I bet she would say no. I bet she would say it was like the most warm start of a connection and relationship that she was like so happy to engage in. And I know just because we're friends now as well. But I offer that just to say, again, I think sometimes we hear strategies or things like this and it feels like there's only one way because that's what we've received, and that has to be like really shitty or doesn't feel good on the receiving end or it doesn't work, and so why bother? And I'd actually forgotten that even with this live stream, that was how I booked my very first paying client. And the reason I almost forgot is because it didn't feel like a cold pitch, but it was absolutely a cold pitch. And it was such a beautiful start to a new relationship that turned into a long-term coaching client, my first paying coaching client. But part of what we were talking about, it's all of these different factors we're talking about. Literally everything we're talking about here came into play for that to be true. And I've had other clients at the start of my business that way that absolutely came from, a cold outreach. But what I would say is cold pitch was really more a warm outreach because of the things we're talking about here. Okay, so ask yourself what's in it for them and see if you can and again, you don't have to like write them a novel about what's in it for them, but I would think about, even if you're taking that perspective and you're thinking about it from that lens, it's gonna change the way in which you're showing up and the way and what your ask is. Okay, the next one here is make it easy for someone to say yes or to take that next step with you. I feel like I talk about this a lot in different ways. I definitely talk about this with clients a lot. I love to say, like, make it easy for people to pay you, make it easy for people to hire you, make it easy for people to sign up or to take that next step. I think with something like this, if you're going to use cold pitching and you want it to feel more like that warm outreach and you want it to actually convert into connections and new relationships and clients and yeses and opportunities, make it really, really easy for the person on the other side to say yes. So I think what's interesting is it's almost like, I think sometimes, I don't know, but I think sometimes the mentality with these things can be is no one's actually going to say yes anyway. So I might as well just make the biggest ask ever. I might as well make it complicated, or I might as well I think there's almost that thing where it's like, well, someone told me to go be brave, so I'm going to be really brave and just balls to the wall here and put this thing out there, except for it makes it very challenging for the person on the other side to say yes if you make such a big ask, which is, again, know where you're at in relationship with someone, or if you don't make it really easy in terms of letting someone know clearly and specifically what the next step for them to take is, or make it really easy for them to click the link, hit reply, make a really clear ask. It's no different than when, and this is why even if you don't want to use a strategy, this applies to sales, make it easy for someone to take the next step with you if you're writing a promo post. So often, it's easy to have 3 call to actions or forget to tell people what that next step to take is. People really need to know what that next step is so clearly. As soon as people have to think about it or they don't know or they're curious, people are busy. So if we're not talking cold pitches, if people have to think about it too much, they're on to the next thing. If we're talking about cold pitches, they're not even asking for this invitation. This isn't even something they're thinking about saying yes or no to. So if it's not a really clear, easy next step for them, they're just gonna bounce and go on to the next thing. All right, hopefully that makes sense for you. Let me know if you want an example. I hope that makes sense. This is kind of not the same tip, but I will just share it because I think it's also helpful. I would also say, if you're gonna do a cold outreach, make it easy for people to consume. I often get people sending me Loom videos and which I appreciate the effort that goes into that. But I'm always thinking, if I've never talked to you before and I don't know who you are and I don't even know if this applies to me, and you're giving me something that's a couple minutes long, said with love, why am I giving away a few minutes of my time? Especially if I find a lot of times people haven't done their research and they're sending something where it's something a problem I don't even need to solve. So I think just even there, that kind of is like, make it easy for people to say yes to you, make it easy for people to take that next step, but also make it easy for people to consume. Okay, got 2 more. I feel like I did over 10 here. I was gonna try to keep it to 10, but there's, I think, a lot of pieces here that we wanna think about and talk about. Okay, last 2 here. So the second to last and thing that I think is important to remember with something like a cold pitch and having that really turn into that warm outreach and being able to use this effectively as a strategy and a tool in your business is remembering this is still a form of marketing. This is still a form of sales. And so everything that applies to marketing and sales still applies here. This is essentially still a form of content. And so I don't know what it is, but sometimes with something like this, I think, again, it's almost that mentality of like, I think sometimes people do this where it's just like, I'm just being brave and I'm just gonna like, just put everything out there and that shows that like I care and then I can say I tried. And I don't know for sure that's the case, but sometimes it seems on the receiving end what it's like. And what I want to say, like what I want to offer is like, absolutely, like kudos to anyone who's being brave and bold and putting themselves out there and like saying like, well, at least I did that thing and at least I tried and at least like I moved through my fear. Like absolutely, I am like hell fuck yes to that. And if you're going to move through your fear and you're going to be bold and you're going to be brave, I would offer also treat this as an actual strategy in your business, not as like I'm just going to cross my fingers or I'm just going to like do this as a way to prove to myself that like I tried, but to really treat this strategically and think this is still a form of marketing, still a form of sales. And so just basic business principles still apply. And I mean, things as simple as if you're going to send an email, there's a subject line and heading there. That subject line and heading still matters. The same way if you were going to send an email to your email list, you'd probably think about that subject line and heading. That subject line and heading is that first thing that tells people if they are going to open your email or not. Same thing if you're going to send a cold email to someone. If you're going to, write something, you probably still want to be concise, the same way you would still want to try to be concise in your content. You still want to think about the problem you solve and the results you deliver. Like just thinking about some of these things, they're still going to apply. And I think being like, yes, applauding the moving through fear always and applauding anything like that. But what I would offer is then also looking at, but how do you treat your business like a business? And if you're going to take a step like this, like give yourself the best chance to succeed, set yourself up for success, treat your business like a business. And if you're going to take an action in your business, I always say, why not then do it strategically and do it the best you can and just take some of those business principles and not that it has to be overworked or you have to like work things hard or anything like that. But I think applying a little bit of strategy can go a very far way to helping then it go further than just, well, at least I tried, or at least I put myself out there, or at least I can prove to myself I'm trying. And it can actually be, no, this can be an actual strategy that I'm committed to having me get results, and I'm going to work this like a strategy and work it until it works. And one of the ways I'm going to do that is I'm going to look at this as, okay, if this is a form of marketing, if this is a part of my sales process, what things do I need to pay attention to here? So hopefully that part makes sense. Like 2 other things that pop up there with that. We kind of talked about this with one of the other ones, but if we think about a piece of marketing, right? A piece of marketing in general, you want one call to action. So that's kind of where I was saying, make it easy for people to say yes to you. Treat this like a piece of marketing, give someone one call to action. If you've hung out with me before, I talk about selling with heart or heart-centered sales, and we talk about empowering the person in front of you to make their own decision, and giving them that information. Think about that mindset when you're sending something like a cold pitch, which is going to have a very different approach than I'm trying to convince someone to do something just because, there's almost like anonymous. I can't say that word, anonymity. I think y'all know what I'm trying to say. I think sometimes with a cold pitch, it can almost feel like there's more freedom to almost be disrespectful or to, throw some of these things out the window. Okay, so marketing still comes into play here, sales still come into play here. This is actually this can actually be a strategy. It does not have to be one you use, but if you're going to apply some strategy to it and set yourself up for success, treat this like a part of your business, not just as a I'm gonna cross my fingers and go, or prove to myself that I'm trying. Okay. Last but not least, if you know me, you know there's no way I am not going to include this one here. But kind of piggybacking off of what we were just saying, if you're treating this like a piece of marketing and a piece of your sales process, and business principles still apply here, and this is something you're using strategically in your business, follow-ups are still a good idea. So what I think can be very, very helpful is if you're going to use cold pitches, and especially if you're going to apply some of the things we're talking about today, maybe warm up that relationship before you reach out by engaging or by, giving some love ahead of time. If you're doing your research, if you're reaching out with something really specific to the person that you're reaching out to and specific to them, if you're doing that, you have such a different opportunity to follow up as opposed to someone who's just copying and pasting a template that's getting deleted. If you're going to also then, again, apply this as something that is a strategy that you want to use and you want to work it like a strategy, I would really think about having some sort of follow-up process in place. And instead of just going wide, how many people can I cold DM or how many people can I cold pitch, thinking, can I pick a few select people that I'm going to go deep with? I'm going to do my homework. I'm going to do that research. I'm going to do some of the pieces we talked about. And then maybe I'm going to follow up more than once to see if I can start a relationship, create that warm outreach, instead of just cold pitch someone. When that doesn't work, go on to the next person. I think that's also part of what gives cold pitching a bad rap. That's why it feels so cold, right? It is just sort of I'm just gonna spray and pray. I'm just gonna this person, they said no. This person, they said, okay, I'm just gonna keep going, instead of I'm actually gonna look at this as a way to start a relationship and think about how can I start a relationship with this new person and actually focus a little time on each person you're reaching out to. The only thing is that makes it cold is you just didn't know each other before, and you're being a little active in the pursuing of starting that relationship and opportunity. So I think the difference with follow-ups with cold outreach that I would say, in my personal opinion, to remember again where you're at in relationship with someone, and to remember what this relationship and dynamic is. If someone has gotten on the phone with you to ask about your services, that is a very different follow-up process. They have raised their hand and said, I am interested, sell to me. That is a very different follow-up process than reaching out to someone you don't have a relationship with, who has not raised their hand, where you are uninvited into their DMs or inbox. Right? Can we see that difference? Which means your follow-up process is probably going to look a little different. So I'd be very mindful of that difference. And I think this is just where being mindful of everything in business is relationships. And the more you can just think about, where am I in a relationship with someone? How does this make sense in relationships? How does this make sense in terms of how human beings interact? What would feel good to me on the receiving end? The more you're gonna have your answers for how to make any strategy work, not just something like cold pitching. But with something like this, I would just be thinking about that and thinking, okay, so that probably means you're not gonna follow up the same amount of times. You're not probably gonna follow up as, the time frame probably won't be quite as tight, but a follow-up is still going to serve you. When I was acting, I found my agent by doing cold reach out, everything we talked about here for agents. And what I chose to do in that arena was 3 follow-ups, instead of when I'm in a sales process with someone, I will follow up 6 times, often more if needed, but I did a cadence of 3 follow-ups 1 week apart, and I would alter the days knowing that I was landing uninvited into someone's inbox, so there was a good chance it was ending up in spam, they weren't paying attention, it just got deleted, I was maybe catching them on a busy day. And so what I would play with was sort of Mondays I usually wouldn't email because Mondays are busy for most people in business, and I would week 1, email on a Monday, week 2, email on a Tuesday, week 1, email on a Tuesday. I wouldn't email on a Monday. Week 2, email on a Wednesday. Week 3, email on a Thursday, and I would stagger the times. So if week 1 was Tuesday, I might do it at 9 a.m. Week 2, maybe I try them on a Wednesday at 1 p.m. Because my thought process behind that was, I'm showing up uninvited in someone's inbox. They don't have a reason to pay attention to my email. They're getting a million pitches, especially as an agent, a day. They're getting so many of these. They don't know me from anyone else. Part of what I'm also looking at is, can I be strategic, really clear on my subject line, was, strategic about everything we've talked about here. But can I also be strategic in that part of what I'm playing with is a little bit of luck with, can I catch them at a time where they're checking their inbox and they might actually take the time to open their email and not just delete it because they're busy. So probably want to avoid Monday and Friday. In general, if we're doing something like this, pick those days in the middle of the week. I'm just going to try a different day, imagining their schedule is probably different on a Tuesday from a Wednesday from a Thursday, and then try different times of day. Maybe they do check their email at lunch. Maybe they check it in the evening. Maybe they check it in the morning. It's not a foolproof system. This is an art as much as it is a strategy, but that way there was some strategy behind it, and I was setting myself up for success, and I was really ensuring there was a better chance with everything else we've been talking about today that my emails were actually going to be opened, as opposed to if I just sent one on a Monday, there's a very good chance it was just going to land in someone's very overcrowded inbox from the weekend, and because they didn't know who I was, it was just going to get deleted. So I think thinking about some of these things, again, thinking of this as this is still a strategy, and applying this to everything in business, just thinking like, how can I take some basic business principles and also think about how can I think about this as a human in front of me that I'm starting a relationship with. What would feel good on the receiving end is going to answer a lot of questions for you. But again, I'm not saying the way I did this when I was acting is the way that's going to make sense for you and your business, but as an example and something so you can more understand the mindset behind it, so you can apply this if this is a strategy you want to apply. Marie says, I really like the depends on where the relationship is as opposed to a set process. I'm so glad that that resonates with you, and nice to have you on as well. Hi. It's been a very quiet live stream, so I always like knowing what lands. It's I think just a really helpful question and frame to put on things, and I think it's honestly why I love the power of one-on-one coaching, because I think it's so easy for us to think there's just a set way for every business, for everyone, for every situation, and the truth is that is just not how business works. Every business is different. Every person running a business is different, but often we're humans selling to humans. Even if you're a business selling to another business and it doesn't feel like that, at the end of the day, if we're exchanging money, we are humans selling to another human, and every human is going to be having a human experience and going through something a little different, and we're going to be in a relationship with them. So I think it can just be such a helpful frame and question mark to ask that will always reliably give you an answer that strategically makes sense, because business is also built on relationships. Okay, I think that was all of my bullet points that I wanted to share with y'all. If you're watching on the replay and you have any questions, throw them at me. If you have any reflections, if there's anything else you want to hear about, but just to tie this up in a bow, even if you're never going to cold pitch someone in your business or think you won't, I think you'd be surprised. I think there are times you probably still will, but even if you're not going to use this strategy, I invite you just to think about a lot of the principles we talked about today, because a lot of these just apply to business across the board, and how you're showing up in your business, how you're thinking about your business, how you're thinking about marketing, how you're thinking about selling, but also how you're going to feel receiving those pitches when someone reaches out to you. And I think it'll just help you reframe a little bit the way you think about this, so you're not just writing off a strategy or a tool you can have in your tool belt, but also so you're not writing off really great things landing in your inbox. I think I'm probably a little more, the reason I probably hired people who have cold pitched me before, I think I'm probably a little more receptive because I've been hired from a relationship that started out as a cold outreach. I want to say warm outreach, but it really was what we're talking about in the traditional cold pitching sense. So I really just want to invite everyone just to reframe and think about this as, again, how can you think about this as starting a relationship, and think about this more as a warm outreach instead of a cold pitch. And then what Marie said, I think is just a good button, like to tie it up, bow to put it in, and then just always to remember where you at in relationship with the person in front of you and use that as your compass for the decisions you're making. Stephanie says, I'm gonna catch the replay. I will be happy to have you on the replay. I'm like, my hair's doing funny things. I'll be so happy to have you on the replay. You'll have to let me know if you have questions, thoughts, reflections. We had some massive tech difficulties at the beginning, so like fast forward through the first 2 minutes when you watch the replay and do yourself a favor there. Y'all, I love you. Thank you for hanging with me. If any of you do want support with your strategy and taking a relationship-based approach, a psychology-based approach to your marketing and sales that works and the mindset around it, that is what I do. That is what I'm really fucking good at. I would love to support you. Always, always, always feel free to book a free call with me. We can chat more about that and when I have some spots opening up. Stephanie says, I try to cold pitch as much as possible to get myself comfortable with it. I'm gonna close on that note. I love that you do that and that you open yourself up to that and you use that as a way to get comfortable. I'll be so interested to hear what your thoughts are after watching the replay, but a lot of credit to you because I think it's just a nice mindset to have there where you are allowing yourself to get comfortable with it. And I'd be really interested to hear if you have any ahas or if there's anything helpful for you. And then definitely throw questions at me, Stephanie, if because we won't be live. Marie says, we love you too. Thank you. All right, y'all know I'm a crier. Comments like that make me want to cry. I love you all so much. Have a beautiful week, and I'll be back next week with another topic for y'all. Bye.